BroadwayCon. And we're going to have a very, very fun time this afternoon. I'm here on behalf of Moulin Rouge, the musical. And it's not just me, I have some incredible people with me. How many of you have seen Moulin Rouge, the musical? Thank you very, very much. We appreciate it. And if you haven't seen, come see us. And if you have, come on back. Why not? Let me invite some people to stage. First, we have Burstein, who plays Hurder. Very exciting. We have Sahr, Ngaujah, who plays Toulouse-Lautrec. Make sure you get that fruit juice. Yep, let me keep the blood sugar flowing. Robyn, Hurder, she plays Levine. We have some guy named Rojas who likes to hang out with us. And then we have some of our incredible creative team. We have Levine, who's our music supervisor, orchestrator, arranger. We have the brilliant Sonya, Tayeh, our choreographer. Certainly not least, we have Alex Timbers, the El Capitan. And John Logan all send their love. They wish they could be here today. They can't for various vacation, sun, and health sick reasons. Everyone's fine, but they just are send all of their love and consumption. Hey guys, how you doing?
It's not true. It's not.
Yeah, that got real dark, man. Let's keep it real light here.
Better up.
Well, we wanted to talk to you guys about the show and kind of give a little bit of insight how we all got here. A lot of us have been working on it for many years. Some of us many years, some of us a couple of years. So we're going to kind of go through the creation and development of the show and try to give some inside scoop to how this kind of huge behemoth. I mean, I've never been in a show this massive before, and so you see something like that and you don't realize the hours and years that go into making something like that. So hopefully we'll give a little insight, and we also took some fan questions online, and we will get to those later on as well. So, as you know, with many movie to musical adaptations, changes inevitably need to happen to make the story work for this new medium. I think taking a movie and putting it on stage, it's really crucial to find out how the medium of stagecraft can tell the story. That was something that definitely had to happen with Moulin Rouge. So Alex, in taking Moulin Rouge to the stage, a lot of the kind of iconic moments from the movie stayed, but how did you and John Logan and the rest of the team decide kind of what to keep and what to adapt from the movie as you put this process together?
That's a great question. So, when you're adapting anything, there's so many choices to make. Do we want to include this? Do we want to not include that? Etc. And I think the best thing you can do is sort of liberate yourself from any feeling of like, we need to, just put a movie on stage, because you can just rent the DVD and it's an incredible DVD. And so what we did is we went about and sort of, with Baz's blessing, because he's a theater maker himself and understands how adaptation works, we said, what is the story we want to tell? What are the things that we really respond to emotionally? How do we think we can make this character conflict richer? How might we replot this arc? What surprises can we put in store for the audience? And so we sort of got excited about the story itself at the most basic level, and then pretended like it was a new musical. We replotted it with note cards. John Logan said, this story beat happens, this story beat happens, this story beat happens. Levine came in, he says, I think there's a song there, I think there's a song there. It wasn't like, where do we put Roxanne? It was like, we think there's an emotional moment here. Here are 6 song ideas, or here are 6 song ideas we could put together. And that's sort of the process. So it was like treating it like it was a new musical, following organically the impulse of what is the story, what do we emotionally connect with, and then as the team expanded, continually asking ourselves those sort of same questions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Justin, Alex kind of mentioned it, but how does the music really play into that? If people that know the show, have seen the show, know the album, there are very iconic songs in this, like Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend, for instance, and it, goes to be mixed with Single Ladies. I mean, that's like such a juxtaposition of styles and time and quality, and how does that really, how do those decisions get made as you're putting kind of those mashups together, as it were?
So, hello. So basically,
while really the charge was to use songs that would be recognizable to the majority of the audience for the majority of the time, the focus was primarily on lyrics. So the idea was that the lyrics needed to serve the story or serve the character, and then from there I would have to go and sort of solve the musical puzzle. So that was really our process. So as Alex just laid out, as we were outlining the show itself, that was very beneficial for me to be part of, because I could see what brought us to this moment where we needed to stick a landing emotionally or narratively.
And I think that's great too. You did a great interview for Playbill, I don't know how many months ago. Justin, this is a musical that functions with all pop music, and I think there's wonderful things about that, but there can be a lot of difficulty in bringing the story to the stage. And you actually, I don't know if you mentioned that it was a reverse jukebox musical or the anti-jukebox musical, and I think what you guys are talking about really speaks to that, because it's all of these choices and selections and changes were based in story, not just saying, okay, now we need to do this song, now we need to do this song. I just thought, that interview did really clearly spoke to that.
Thank you, Aaron.
You're welcome.
Nice of you to say.
Well, yeah, he's a smart guy, man. And Sonya, what was your first experience with the film? Is it something you saw and you said, oh my God, that needs to be on stage, or what was your kind of confidence level in terms of bringing that to the stage, or if it, how did you feel about it?
Hey everyone.
Stuff is okay, I guess.
I saw
I guess
the
our stuff's
premiere
okay.
in Detroit at the Majestic Theater, and I remember feeling charged and inspired, and I remember running out of the theater and just singing all the songs and dreaming it could be a part of me one day. And then it became a part of me one day, right now, and it's the type of theatrical experience that begs to be a live stage production. That's what it felt like. It has so much charisma and theatricality and this heightened physicality that I always talk about, that I love, that I'm so honored to be doing. So it just, you can feel the energy shooting out of the screen and just wants to be fed on that live stage.
Yeah, I think something you said too about kind of watching it then and then imagining now that we're all sitting here. I mean, I don't know if you guys felt that way too, but I mean, I saw the movie and I was very struck by it in a similar way, and I could have never imagined 18 years later to be sitting on stage talking about it. So how did you guys feel when you saw the film as well? I mean,
Whoa, hello everyone, hello! I saw the movie, its opening weekend in a little town called Brunswick, Maine.
That's Maine, yeah.
Right, New England. I was doing music, summer stock there, and I saw the movie. And I remember when Roxanne happened on the screen, and I got that feeling that I had gotten throughout my life with musical theater and dance. I started getting the shakes and starting to feel this energy and this boil in my body when I saw Roxanne and I saw Caroline O'Connor. And I said to myself, to my boyfriend at the time, I couldn't leave the theater for 10 minutes because I was a mess, sobbing. But afterwards we were walking out and I said, this needs to be a Broadway show and I need to be Nene. Like, I need to be her. And it's pretty amazing. It took 18 years, but I'm here. Yeah. I'm doing it. So dreams come true. Woo!
So Sahr, you have a very interesting portion of this because you actually play a real person on stage. So I mean, we're kind of all, we play these bohemians and we're kind of ideas or, amalgamations of characters that could be found in the Moulin Rouge in 1899. But Sahr actually plays Toulouse-Lautrec, who's a real, incredible, one of the most incredible artists ever. So, I mean, that's a very unique experience. And how did you go about preparing for that, for kind of bringing a reality of this person you're playing into this world?
Hi everyone, hello. And Danny, he plays a real guy too. Not as well known as Lautrec, but...
Or not as well.
Apparently Zietler spent all of his money on light bulbs. True story.
And bringing the can-can.
And bringing the can-can.
To the Moulin Rouge.
That's right. From the depths of the underbelly of
So are you saying that the Moulin Rouge actually was quite successful but Ziegler had this wild idea to use real lighting, and it kind of sunk their profits.
It was the new thing. He was like, this is going to be the most electrified club in Montmartre.
So Ziegler was quite ahead of his time.
Thank you.
It's just the problem was the price of electricity and light bulbs was just a little too high.
They hadn't worked that part out yet.
So we're sorry about that, but he was onto it. You know what I mean? Because look, there's lights in here. So. Anyway, so what was it like kind of learning about and doing research about the track and then kind of putting it into something like this?
It's really a fascinating journey. And, obviously, well, I don't know if it's obvious or not, but, when you tasked with, bringing someone's real life, into, a different sphere, particularly to portray it, the responsibility that comes along with it, I always find to be rather immense. Whether people are alive that remember that person or not, family members or whoever, there's always someone who knows something more about that real life person than I ever feel like I do if I'm just trying to take that on. So, I did a lot of reading, which I'm still engaged in. There are some really comprehensive documentaries out, which I actually called and harassed this filmmaker to make it re-available. He took it away from. Anyway, that's another story. But
This is 100% true. I didn't know that, but it's true.
Yeah, and then also trying to center it in reality. Like, for me, I wanted to, follow, the style of movement that was going on at that time. Like, when we go back and look at older films from the turn of the century, the easiest example would say, like, Chaplin, who I watch a lot of still in the dressing room, but like trying to find sort of the physical, visual language that, when we watch the film, Boss, he takes the time to create these tableaus, even in this modern sort of MTV style of delivery, he still gives us those things that really help us, this is, turn of the century France. So it's like how to behave on stage in a way that every once in a while just reminds the audience this is, you can just suspend your reality for a bit. So anyway, all of those things were a part of the, finding the process.
And I hope this doesn't put you on the spot, because I only mean this as a compliment, but, Ricky and I have a moment kind of when the show starts before we enter into the opening number, and we're backstage, and, every single night at the time, Toulouse-Lautrec walks in the room, and that's what we're dealing with backstage. So Sahr is completely in character and completely engaged, and will speak to you as Toulouse-Lautrec, and it's one of the most incredible things I've ever experienced. So
That's true.
That's why I thought, teeing this question up for him was he was particularly adept at answering it, because he's Toulouse-Lautrec for 3 hours every night.
Yeah, we'll be talking about what we're having for dinner. It's like, hey man, how you doing? You going for a drink after? I don't know. Bonsoir, mon ami!
So we're like, all right, well, you know what? It's helpful for us because, if we're like a little tired or, maybe you're thinking about something else, then it's like, whoop, time to do the show now. So I guess we're doing the show. Yeah. Alex, I wanted to ask you, since Karen and Oliva, our fantastic leading ladies on vacation this week, can you talk a little bit about Satine's and the Duke's character differences from the movie? Because those, I think, are two characters that, as the story kind of evolved and got adapted to stage, their characters are two that really did shift a little bit.
Yeah, totally. Karen and Oliva, Tamutu. So the requirements of a protagonist in a musical are different from a film, obviously. And I think one of the things that I think we all felt was that for the characters of Christian and Satine, that musical theater characters need to be making positive, active choices as much as possible. We talk a lot about like Charlie Brown, like he can go up to kick the football can get yanked away, but he keeps going back up to kick it. And so I think characters can keep failing, but I think in musical theater they need to have as much agency as possible. And I think one of the things that's amazing about the movie, but not necessarily like a requirement of the movie in film, is that sort of question about like how passive, how active you are. And I think for us, knowing that our Satine in the stage show while it works really well in the movie, couldn't sing "Someday I'll Fly Away" like a sort of a princess locked away in a tower in a fairy tale. Our Satine needed to be driving as much action as possible, taking as much agency. So we thought a lot about like strength and power and ferocity. And then when we met Karen Olivo and she came in and sort of performed what her idea was for the role, we were just so taken aback by it, and I'm floored by her every time I see her on stage. And then for Tam, I don't know if for those of you that know the movie, the Duke is this incredible character. He's very like foppish and funny, and we thought that it might even be more dynamic and more bring more edge to the stage show and bring more like dramatic heft, to have the Duke have a little more like danger and feel like a real like sort of sexy worthy adversary to Christian, to make Satine's dilemma harder, to put Christian in the crosshairs a little bit more. And so Tam Mutu.
Yeah, that's what it feels like kind of inside the play too, different from the movie. You know, it's almost that there's kind of a moment in the second act, I don't know if this, I'm sure this is planned, where it's like, it's almost that the Duke is a viable option for Satine, you know, as her life is kind of coming to an end and she's trying to save the Moulin Rouge and help her friends. Like, there actually a question I think is asked in our show that's different from the film, that maybe she's better off with the Duke to kind of save everyone, you know, and that I guess I'm just ruining everything, you know what I mean? It's like as if one of these guys would turn to me and say, would you just, I think we've talked about that, just kind of about our chandelier scene, you know, Sahr and I, you know, it's like Lautrec wants to say to Christian, like, would you just like kind of calm down for a minute and everything will just be okay? You know, and instead you just ruin it. So so that's a really interesting question that we asked in the show that the movie doesn't necessarily ask. Danny, how can you compare this kind of, you know, this adaptation from a movie to film to some other things that you might have worked on in the past? Just kind of any kind of adaptation of the shows that you've been in, because I know you've done.
Well, just thinking of our opening number. Our opening is very much lovingly borrows from the great traditions of musical theater, like from Cabaret and from Fiddler on the Roof.
Two shows that you have a bit of familiarity.
Yeah, you know, that's why they were on the tip of my tongue. You know, Jerry Robbins famously kept asking the writers of Fiddler on the Roof what the show was about. And they kept saying, it's about a milkman and blah, blah, blah. And then finally they said, it's about tradition. And that set up, he said, well then go write that. And that was how that number came to be. And our show borrows from that in the same kind of way. It sets up the show, the club, perfectly.
Yeah, if you think about that, you know, I think our opening number is eight or so minutes. 11 minutes, 11-minute opening number, but it really does. You kind of see all of these different groups of people that all exist within this club and world, and it's, I mean, that's very much what tradition does at the beginning.
Exactly, and then you steal a little from Joel Grey.
Because who wouldn't want to steal anything from Joel Grey?
And you know, and he came to see the show about a month ago, a little over a month ago, and was so wonderful backstage afterwards. He absolutely loved it. And we're also helped by that incredible Derek McLean set.
Yes, of course.
You walk in the door and your mind is blown. So much of the work is done in a way for us, and then we just come out, and then those girls, those four Lady M's, who are incredibly hot, what can you say? And then you get the old Jew, you know, jumping up there and dancing with everybody. It's a lot of fun.
That's something that I love as a theater goer. I love some of my favorite experiences that I've had in the theater, or moments that I've walked into a room and I feel like I'm transported. I have to say one thing that I always think back on is walking in to see Bloody Bloody Andrew Jackson at the Public, and the way that room was just, you know, I felt like the stage never ended. You know, I felt like in the audience that I was just a part of something, and I so appreciated that you guys kind of took that work that you did with that onto even a bigger scale with our show. It's really, really special. So that leads us to another part of what we wanted to talk about is the world of Moulin Rouge, and a lot of that goes with walking into the theater. And a part of the fun of me getting to play Christian is I get to narrate and I get to join the audience a bit as they experience the Moulin Rouge. I've kind of learned, through my path and my journey of the show every night that I find at times that I get to kind of be the audience's eyes into this world. I'm this person who's, from the middle of America and in 1899 and all of a sudden is kind of, I've always had this artistic yearning, but all of a sudden I'm dropped into like the mecca of art in Bohemian Paris in 1899, and I kind of, it's not even my wildest dreams. It's, I think, everything beyond my wildest dreams. And so I really think that I get to share the experience of the audience of walking into that theater, which is just, an incredible thing. I mean, Alex, can you talk about kind of your intention and immersion, and what we're talking about, and immersing the audience right away, as well as how Derek McLean's incredible set and Kathy Zubrick's costumes play such an important role in creating that world.
Totally. Well, you guys said it so beautifully, but I mean, the idea is to really transport the audience. That as soon as you step off 45th Street, you're in Fin de Siècle Paris. And one of the things that's wonderful about Moulin Rouge is it's a location, but it's also an idea. It's not what the real Moulin Rouge looks like. It's sort of the Moulin Rouge of your dreams in your mind. So it's aspirational and it's exotic. It's everything Harold Ziegler describes. And I think the idea of sort of entering a space where immediately you realize there's no division between actor and audience, we're all in a room in a space together. It felt really exciting and kind of dangerous and seductive. And then we wanted to make something that felt democratic, that where no matter where you're sitting in the room, there's a runway near you or an elephant sculpture or something like that, and so that everyone was having the exact same experience, because that's what the promise that the Moulin Rouge held 100 years ago.
And Justin, can we just go back to a little bit with the music about, because I mean the opening number, I think that's definitely a moment in the show where we kind of take very specific things from the movie and then kind of layer in our own flair, idea, very subtle changes in the opening number. One of my favorite things is I didn't even realize until we were on stage in Tech on Broadway. We've done a full run in Boston, and someone mentioned the Beck number in the opening number, and I turned and I said, "Where is there a Beck song in the opening number?" And I had absolutely no idea. And now I listen for it every night. But I'd been doing the show for over a year, and I'd never heard this moment in the opening number. So, can you talk a little bit about, how all of that evolved and changed in scope for our production?
Sure. So one of the things that Alex and John and I, John Logan, our book writer, spoke about early on was passing the smell test, and that really what we wanted to do was both reassure those that love the film that we also love the film and that our adaptation is coming from that place of love, but also that they should prepare themselves for some additional surprises and some off-ramps and some exciting new materials. And so, it sort of happened differently at different points in our development. Sometimes it was very intentional from the start to say, okay, so we're going to do Lady Marmalade and we're going to do Can, but then we want to do this sort of wild mashup of these 4 different songs in this moment, right? A new intro because, for example, the Duke's intro is different because it has to reflect the new adaptation of the character itself. And then at other times, and partly this is just because of the way I am, and I think a lot of people are actually like this, where you'll hear a song and then suddenly you'll start to sing another song on top of it, right? You've done that before, I'm sure? Some people? No? Just me? Cool.
Just the musical geniuses in the room. But.
No, but also sometimes it's like, a simple example would be like when, I remember the first time I heard Blurred Lines, and I thought to myself, oh my God, what a cool idea to sample Got to Give It Up by Marvin Gaye. That's what I thought they were doing, right? And so, whoops.
Cut to the lawsuit.
I called the lawyers.
So thanks for doing that.
No, but actually that's part of it too, which is that, pop music, the sort of 20th century pop culture quilt, you know, is pastiche. It is sampling. It is borrowing. It's stealing if you're really good at it, right? And so I think in a way that was something that we were doing to honor Baz's signature style, which is excess. And one of the things that Baz said to us when we first sat down with him was, he said, it's not just excess for excess' sake, right? It's actually a reflection of what was going on during the Belle Epoque, which was suddenly the mass production of alcohol, right? So everybody was drinking all of a sudden, right? It wasn't just a sort of a luxury item. So everyone's drinking absinthe. Everyone's just trying to suck the marrow out of life. And so in a way, music was a great way to translate his visual and cinematic style, because you can hear two songs at the same time and your ears are able to process it in a different way.
A lot of people have mentioned kind of the very iconic, you know, I get to watch it every night after I kind of lift the sign, and you see the curtains part, and you see the silhouette of these four incredible Herculean beings behind this drop. Robyn, you are one of these iconic Lady M's. You open the show with Lady Marmalade, and the audience goes crazy from the first note. And I have to say, I watch it, and then I walk up the side of the house to the back, and I cannot tell you how many times I see people in the audience just like this. It's like a sea of people with that face as they're starting. So Robyn, what's it like to open the show that way? To have a moment that starts a show that way?
Yeah, it's a gift. It's so interesting. This show, if you've seen it, especially for the ensemble and myself, there's a lot of physical activity that goes along with performing the show every night. And sometimes you can be a little tired going up on a Thursday matinee, but yesterday was a perfect example. We're all a little tired, and the conversations that Jay, Holly, and Jackie and I have behind that curtain are so funny and so down to earth and normal, just women and gentlemen talking. And then we hear, it's Christian sign, and it's like, meow, that sound effect. And we're like, here we go, and we get into our positions and we stop talking. And then all of a sudden we hear the boom, and that bass note, you hear that clack, and then you can hear the audience go, and then they start screaming, and no matter what, however tired you are, or you've been having a bad day, or I'm thinking about how my son was acting out in school, I hear that, I hear that boom clack, and you hear the roar from the audience behind the curtain, and it's like the curtain is rising and the gates are just about to open, and these four beasts are about to just invite you to the Moulin Rouge with a smile, but pretty aggressively. We're just ready to tell you to saddle up. And it's exciting because the lighting is so bright, and I don't see anything in the show usually. The only times I get to see people and get to make that eye contact with them is the opening number, and it's my favorite part because I get to see all your faces, and the faces range from like absolute utter shock to excitement. People are already crying, people are squealing, people are screaming at my face. It's such a treat to get to start my job every day like that.
And Danny, you get to kind of MC this 11-minute ship of an opening number, and a lot of that has to do with breaking the fourth wall and talking directly to the audience, which is always a thing that, I'm sure you have the experience. It's a really tricky thing in the theater. I think it has to be handled really, really well, and you do it so brilliantly. And what's it like to be that close to interact, with the audience like that every night?
I love it. I love talking to the audience, and it's something different than I've ever done before. That's really, the opening number is really why I decided to do the show. I met with Alex in a diner on 72nd Street in Broadway, and he said, here's this script, I'd like you to look at it. And I read it, and that opening number, I thought, oh yeah, that's so enticing and sexy and really balls to the wall. I thought, yeah, I gotta try that. And it's fun, and you get to talk to the audience, and I say crazy things to the audience. My mic isn't always on, thank goodness. But I do, and
You said something great yesterday.
Yeah.
What did you say? You can. Did you say you can? You can laugh. You can smile. What did you say?
No, I don't know. They were having a full-on conversation.
Oh, okay.
I said, "Hello, I'm talking here."
Oh, that's what it was.
The other day.
They are in the can-can.
The question I get more than anything else is, do you still get nervous right at that moment? And I can absolutely tell you, absolutely yes. And I love that.
Well, that's an interesting thing because, you know, I think when you're just doing your show, you get into a rhythm, or I feel this way, like the first couple shows you're nervous, but then you don't really think about it. But it's a whole different thing when you have to be present and interact and talk with people, because then that makes a lot of sense.
And that opening, you know, popping through the curtain, and that energy that you have to put out there, you know, you have to have rays of light coming out of you.
Yeah.
And that's the way I think of it. And then run all the way out to the edge of to the very lip of the stage and bring them on this journey with you.
Yeah.
That's very exciting to me.
Yeah. And Sonya, you know, throughout this kind of incredible world that's been created, your choreography is somehow true to the period, but also completely modern at the same time, which I think is a very delicate balance that could easily have not. How did you begin to work those two ideas together?
Hearing all of the beautiful things about our show from behind my head is like such a crazy feeling. I'm getting like a rush on my back. There's classics in the movie that I love, the can-can, the tango. In the frame of the movie, there's so much physical excess. Like Baz's favorite thing is excess, and the physicality in the movie, and seeing the sweat drop off their skin, and seeing the aggression of the can-can and the tension of the tango, but all in this very genderless atmosphere. There was no hardy focus of what a woman does and what a man does, and that's how I base my entire existence, especially in dance. And so for this to be the first piece for me on a Broadway stage is profoundly filled with pride because of those facts. I work in excess. I love highly physical action. So to celebrate the can-can with these incredible women, but also in the way I saw it, in terms of the history behind it and the danger behind it, and again, the highly physical action of it. And I was graced with many hours of pre-production prior to the first day of rehearsal, which is a complete gift, because you're able to, I watched the movie before I went into the studio, and then I stopped watching it because I wanted to remember all of my first feelings about it, and then hold it tightly, and then explode it open into my world. And that's how I approached every day.
Yeah, and it's, if you don't know what pre-production is, it's a kind of a time for a choreographer or anyone working on a show to bring people in that they work with, or even people that are going to be in the show, just to kind of workshop different, material. And it's a luxury because it doesn't always get to happen. So it's a really great part of the process as well.
Yeah, because you're able to just be in the space without the pressure. Well, there's still an immense amount of pressure. But you have a little bit more air because you're just exploring. You're starting to get your feet wet and explore it all. But honestly, the one saving grace and the dream of doing this show is because the swiftness and the action in the movie, the swift cuts, the way it's edited, the way it drives, I really was inspired to hold on to that feeling, but without the camera. How can you mess with momentum that way physically? How can you find those cuts and those angles and that tension and hear the breath? And I can hear them sometimes, and it makes me weep every time when I'm like really far back watching them, and I can hear the stomp and I can hear the breath. That's what I wanted to show on the stage as my own voice as a choreographer, and also because I remember how I felt watching those moments in that excess watching the movie.
That's great.
Thank you.
There's one person up here that hasn't spoken yet, and he actually is one of the people that stomps so hard on stage that I get worried about his shins.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Listen, man, you hit those with such vigor
Listen,
and passion.
if you're gonna do something, you gotta do it right.
That's right. Well, Ricky, let's talk to you for a minute here. I have to say, this kind of top to bottom, this group of 30 unicorns of people that make up this ensemble and this collective is the most talented group of people I've ever been around or worked with. It's also like it's an incredibly diverse group of people. People come from all over the world, different ages, body types, backgrounds. I mean, what is your impression of someone maybe not necessarily? Well, actually, there's not necessarily about it. Someone being from outside of the U.S. kind of coming in and working just with a group of people that's just all across the map and across the board.
I mean, it's an honor and a pleasure. It's so much fun. I don't know if you guys know, I was born in Chile.
You got Chile? Why don't you talk about your journey to the show as well, because it's a particularly unique one, and if I may say so myself, humbly, I think I think you were one of the, and this is nothing against the people that were involved in the show before, but you were kind of one of the last pieces that really made this whole thing take off.
Oh, thanks, man. Stop it. Stop looking at me like that. It was like, first of all, because I auditioned in London, after they had auditioned over here in the US, and I always thought, why is it, I always found it weird that they auditioned in London for a Hispanic person. There's so many Hispanics here. And so they auditioned in London, and I got a call from my agent, and it was really early, super cold the morning I went in, and I got sent all this stuff, and I originally thought it was opening in England, because they were auditioning in London, and he was like, no, it's Boston. I was like, oh, all right. So, they sent me all the Santiago stuff, the songs, and I went in, they videotaped it, and they sent it over to the team in New York, and then he calls me up and he says, listen, they want to fly you over to do a workshop there. In the final audition, I was like, what? Right? So I was like, yeah, I'm available to do that, it's fine. So, as you would. And then, they flew me, raced over to New York and put me up in a nice little hotel around the corner. And I met these guys. Well, I didn't meet you I met you the first day, didn't meet you till the second day, and I met you. I thought Justin hated me when he first met me, because he was drilling me. It was like really...
Not true. It's not true at all.
So specific.
You need to get over that. Quick. It really brings us up.
Do you guys want to take a minute and just get past this?
I would love to, actually.
First of all, when he saw the tape, he thought I was crazy.
Maybe afterwards. Maybe we can do that afterwards.
So then we did the workshop day where I went through all the material and learned some choreography of the lovely Katie Spellman, and Fred Odegaard was there as well, and Paloma Garcia Lee, who is in the show as well. We did the choreography as she was paying me for the choreography.
Did anyone talk to you that day about how hard you stamp, or did they?
Listen.
No.
Let me just wrap this up, all right? So, we'll get to the stamp later. So then, we did the workshop, and then I came back the next day and did the final for everyone else, which is where I met Sonya. And it went super well, and Sonya was going, yes, yes! Remember that? And I was dancing, and I was like...
That was my favorite part of my audition too, when Sonya and Tayeh would scream at me in my audition. I'm like, oh my god.
I was like, I think it's going well. She likes it, she likes it. I threw in a stomp and she was like, yes. And then I flew back to London, and then they offered me the job, and then I had to go through the whole process of getting the visa sorted out and everything, which is it was fun. And then I started in Boston. Actually, no.
The
rehearsals in New York.
Yeah.
A week after I started.
Yeah. Well,
just for the record.
It's not for the record. See, we've got a running thing because we're the last two that haven't had a day off yet.
Our vacations are back to back, and his is after mine. But I started a week earlier than him in Boston.
Yeah, but it's a different country.
Even.
Man, it's not the same thing.
Even. Oh, come on. Anyway.
Do the honors.
Justin, there are many points in the musical where the music is really leading our storytelling. And how, I think we've talked about this a little bit, but I think especially kind of the run of, in the second act of Chandelier, Roxanne, Crazy, Rolling in the Deep, kind of tumbling to the end of the show. Like, how did you put that incredible run of songs together? Because I think that's kind of from inside of the story, I can feel that it's something that as an actor, you know, sometimes you kind of have to really gear it and generate through, but kind of, I just get to really go on the emotional ride, and a lot of things from my perspective on stage, I just always take from the music, and that's a run of theater that no matter how I'm feeling on the day, I can just kind of give over to the music, and it takes me where I need to go. So just talk a little bit about that part of the show.
Sure. You know, I think that sort of just happened organically as we were working on the show. You know, I don't think we intended for the last 20 or so minutes of the show to sort of morph into this, you know, power opera, you know, but it did. And, you know, I think the idea to use Crazy by Gnarls Barkley with Rolling in the Deep by Adele, you know, was one of those ideas that just felt sort of inherently Moulin Rouge, because they're two songs that are just coming from such a deep, visceral, emotional place, you know? And actually, I remember, you know, for the longest time, that was sort of my favorite moment of the show. My favorite moment of the show always changes, because every time I come see the show, it just morphs and moves around. But I just remember the first time that Baz and CM came to a presentation, and that was the first thing that he called out afterwards, is he came up to me and he was like, that moment, Crazy Rolling, that is Moulin Rouge, keep going there. Like, the more you can take us there, you know, that's the way to go. And I think that, you know, like I said, we focused on lyrics, and it's funny because sometimes we'll talk, or, you know, I'll speak to, you know, one of our company members, and they'll mention that they heard a song from the show on the radio recently, and they didn't realize that actually the lyrics in our show version have been sort of cut and moved around, you know, and that actually sometimes it's easy because, you know, a lot of what we try to do with the orchestration and the arrangement is still kind of preserve the feeling of those songs, but actually so many times I would literally print up the lyrics and cut them, you know, by stanzas and verses. And so sometimes even within something like the Elephant Love Medley, when you're singing the Regina Spektor part, you know, so we're in Fidelity, you know, that is stitching together 3 different stanzas to tell that story moment, you know? And so really at the end of the day, it was always just going back to that guiding principle and then having to, I call it the musical puzzle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's, you know, that again, that's fascinating to me, because I've heard, you know, I've watched, I've heard interviews about Stephen Sondheim talking about how he writes music, or listened to Mark Shaman and Scott Whitman talk about how they create brand new music. So the fact of, again, that this is a show that looks like it's all pop music, but it's been treated with the same kind of care and thought that a new musical would be treated with. And I think that's another really important thing, and the thing that I'm proud of with our show is that, you know, I view the show, and I think we all do, is it's kind of like a love letter to previous musicals. You know, it's kind of, there are specific moments from our show that steal from things. Danny talked about the opening, about, you know, it being a version of Fiddler on the Roof or Cabaret, and you know, Alex, can you talk about some other things? I mean, I think Shut Up and Raise Your Glass steals from some West Side. I mean, Backstage Romance at the start of the show is like very much a Kiss Me Kate-esque number. I mean, can you talk a little bit about taking elements from other the titans of theater that have stood before us?
Yeah, so we talk about Broadway constantly. We talk about Broadway history constantly, and so we're always, you know, from 6.5 years ago to, you know, probably last week, we're constantly referencing other shows. Oh, feels kind of like, oh, I love that moment. Is there any way we could impart this kind of energy? So we, on Moulin Rouge, as much as the show is like a sort of like, you know, as much as the movie was like a Valentine to like different music and different like film, you know, Marlene and Dietrich or this person, you know, we've tried to, as much as possible, infuse the stage show with our love, which is Broadway history. And I think one of the things you mentioned is a great one to talk about is the top of Act 2. These incredible performers kick us off, and it is the start of basically the rehearsal process of the show within a show. And so these guys are performing in it, and we see them performing parts of the show within the show, choreographed by the amazing Sonya Tayeh, but also sort of acting out sort of their own sort of like feelings of like their sort of own attraction and frustration with each other.
Hello, everyone.
It's not the song. And then eventually the company comes in and you see the rehearsal sort of taking flight, and it builds and builds into this John Williams score, and it sort of blows through the roof. And where that all came from when we were talking was Too Darn Hot from Kiss Me Kate. We're like, what are the great openings of Act 2 in musicals? And we thought about that. We thought about how it starts at a simmer. These people who are in a show together and they're acting out their own frustrations and their own attractions and their own personal dramas, and then the rest of the company comes in and then they blow the roof off of the theater. And that is how that number was inspired.
Yeah, and Sonya, why don't you talk a little bit about how you guys went, how you and your amazing creative team kind of went about, you know, bringing all of this story that's portrayed in Backstage Romance. I mean, it starts with Santiago Nini, and then within the number, kind of the love triangle between Christian and Satine and the Duke is layered in, and then at the same time, you're just getting overwhelmed with this incredible visceral talent on stage. I mean, how did you even begin to march onto the Death Star?
And now for the interpretive dance. I feel like it's like the wrap it up music.
I gotta wrap it up clock. We got 14 minutes left, so I'm not getting tapped off just yet.
Yeah, sorry. The baseline of it was to how can you physicalize. First of all, the movement has to drive the story, just like everything else in the piece. That's focus, important, so important. So the focus was, and I think about words that drive me to make sure I have a clear line of what I'm choreographing, and it was an affair, a secret, sexual tension, and love, and dangerous love, and what all of those heightened emotions, how they build. So it just, you watch this temperature rise. You see Christian and Satine sneak a kiss in between these garment racks of costumes, with the Duke is just steps away. See, there's that tension. Is he gonna see? He's gonna see, but the joy of that secret is inside of that as well. But while that is happening, you're seeing the company prepare for rehearsing for the show within a show. You are watching prior to that moment, Ricky and Robyn start the build, and the curtains open, and you just see this beautiful man smoking a cigarette, leaning back, woeing his woes over everything, and then this beautiful, powerful warrior, dangerously incredible artist, Robyn, Hurder, come in, and you just know trouble is gonna come in. No trouble is coming. So it was just a matter of how to show those really heightened emotions and keep filling the space with it, and then not finding an answer. You're just left with this explosion, of wonder of what's gonna happen. But the signs inside of it, that danger is coming. And with an incredible ensemble of virtuosic performers, in my opinion, that have made my work shine like nothing I've ever experienced.
I've never had an experience of watching a number in a show that I was in for the first time as I did when I saw that number.
Thanks.
I mean, I just kept losing our minds, you know, and the number like doubles down and doubles down and doubles down, and then it's really, really something special that you did. It's really great.
Thank you.
We have a member of our cast on stage. I think this is this your 19th Broadway show, Danny?
It's my 18th.
This is Danny's 18th. Which is just beyond, I can't even fathom that. It's really something. So let's ask you, you know, how do you think about what we're talking about something like Moulin Rouge? Like if you were to step outside of it, if you weren't in the show, how would you think that, you know, this kind of compares to the you know, the Broadway canon, I guess, as it were? Because I you know, for me, I'm so proud of what we've done, and I hope it, you know, can have a very long life. But like, what is your perspective on that part?
I think it's unique in the Broadway canon. It's unlike anything I've ever seen before. Unlike anything I've ever done before or seen. I just go back to that opening number. It's just incredible, and the top of Act 2. I have, you know, the catbird seat watching that number every single night, Sonya, and it just builds, and as you said, and it's incredible. Blows my mind. This show blows my mind. It really does. And it not only tells a beautiful love story, it entertains in a way that I've never seen or heard before. And that is because of you three, really. It's your brainchild.
Well, I put a little thing out the other day, and we tried to take some questions from you guys and people online. So I have some questions that have been gathered. So hopefully you'll hear your question. First one is from @Gina Lacavetto. So shout to @Gina. For anyone in the cast, do you have any pre-show rituals that help you prepare for each show? Anyone want to take that?
I do this. To check that the voice is there.
A lot.
Fine.
You do. He does it actually in front of me, and he does it a few times. And I say, "Hey, man, you don't even do anything that high in the show."
Do you know what Aaron's warm-up is? When he sings "The Hills Are Alive." That's his warm-up. He's like, I don't know if my voice is going to come out until I start singing that. And I'm like,
I try not to stress
Didn't he do
about
the
it.
opening already?
What?
no, he hasn't.
No, that's the first thing I sing. Yeah.
Yeah, because he's, and in the opening it's like this. So we're sweating. He's like this. With those really big eyes. Like, so pretty.
Hey, but speaking of Aaron, I also want to just give a shout out to Aaron, because I've never seen anybody like him before. He really does. The work that he does every single night, and then from crazy rolling into the deep, that is just something solid, man. Every single night.
He's got a unicorn voice. He never ever falters. Like, it always sounds like that, and it's not fair. Never change. Like, doesn't crack. Knock on wood.
Even when we were rehearsing, like always, like fucking amazing. This is a CBS.
I just have to say, just to jump into that, what's so beautiful about it is the cast really takes pride in it and ownership in it, and I think that's why there's such ease and consistency and electricity that really holds, because it's hard to do 8 shows a week. It's hard to look out and hope it lasts and all of those things, but in terms of preparation for the ensemble that I know, they get there 2 hours, 3 hours before, and they're in the hallway or in the theater on the floor, stretching, warming their bodies up, warming their voices up, just very focused on holding on to the show they're really proud of. And it's really inspiring to see.
Yeah, it's very true. People are there hours before getting ready. It's really something. This next one is for Sonya, actually. It's from @Redheaded Scott, but spelled R-E-A-D. Very clever handle. I can talk. Very clever handle. I think this is a great question. How much of your choreography do you create beforehand, just you and the music, and how much do you create on the spot with the dancers?
depends on the project, but for this particular one, I did, like I said, a lot of pre-production so I could be, it was just the amount of rehearsal prior to the tech rehearsal, so when you get into the stage and you're putting it on the stage, isn't an enormous amount of time, so I wanted to be extra prepared and just have an arsenal filled with ideas. So in this particular situation for Moulin Rouge, I had loads of archival footage ready with both of my associates, with the laptops on the table, with everything just open and ready. But it depends. But for this, I just wanted to make sure that I had ideas and things that were really driving the story that I didn't want to falter. And sometimes when you have space between your pre-production, well, this is for me, space between your pre-production and then the actual first day of rehearsal, I get bored of things fast, and then I start to question myself. So I do the pre-production, I have them download the videos, and then I don't look at them until my first day of rehearsal. And my first day of rehearsal, we had 67 videos before I walked in the building. But because of time, and just to make sure that I was prepared. But with that, in rehearsal, I don't like to be a machine. I teach the choreography, and then we have an open dialogue. My ideas may not suit the body, and we discuss what it does, and my ideas in my innate way is highly physical, difficult, full-bodied, so it requires time. And so with that comes collaboration, ideas change. So I didn't walk in with demanding these ideas. I walked in saying, hey, these are my thoughts, here are the phrases, and we build from there. So it turns into a collaborative effort, but I don't, my instincts is not to just walk in without having a feeling.
That's great. And that's a great question too, because I think that's something that's very kind of inside that you would think maybe would be one way or the other. So that's wonderful. Here's a cool one. This is for the whole cast from @AlleyCat 7273. I can't read numbers for some reason. If you could switch roles with another character, who would it be?
Duke.
The Duke. I'd love to see your Duke, actually.
I want to be Zidler.
Maybe we'll have like an actors fun night where it's just like you pick what you want to play. You'd be Zidler. What about you, Rob?
I would be Satine so I could rest my body. And I've always wanted to sing Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend on the stage, so I'm being honest.
Sahr?
God, it's tough. Yeah.
I mean, like top 3.
Santiago, Zidler, and the Duke.
Okay. All right.
I mean, yours is interesting, but
Would you say a lot of work?
it's a lot of work. Yeah. I love watching you do it, man.
It's actually a great moment. You know, I get to do Nature Boy with this incredible human being every night, and I have to walk stage left, and I give him a handshake, and it's basically like, he's like, hey man, have fun with the rest of the first act. He's going upstairs to, have a bath, or kind of gives me a little, see you later, man. Thanks. Very honest. How about you?
I would like to be any one of the dancers, just to be able to do that.
Feel what that feels like?
To feel what that feels like.
Yeah.
Especially Reed Luplau. He has one kick that he does. Where he flies in the air and then kicks his leg up, way up high, and then comes down like a cat, and then scampers away. And I think, how the fuck does he do that? Consistently and beautifully and so high in the air, just.
He also does a backflip at the end of the opening number, right in front of me on a passerelle that's about this wide. So yeah,
The audience, when their mouth drops when he does that, I'm dropping also my mouth every night.
I want to do that.
What about you, Aaron? What do you?
I'd love to feel what that feels like, to be able to do that kind of dancing. I spend so much time with on stage, and it's kind of the way it works in a show, kind of the way your track works backstage. I spend a lot of time with both Sahr and Ricky, And I think I would love to play the Trek one night. I just think that would be great. Yeah. I don't want to take your rest away from you, but you know. So I guess we're kind of at the end here. So thank you guys so much for being with us.